The sun hung mercilessly over the barren stretch of red earth as the wind swept across the valley like a whisper of judgment, lifting dust into the faces of the men who had gathered. They dragged her, Ilara Mae Dalton, the quiet girl who baked pies for the church and tended her sick. Farther, across the scorching sand with ropes biting into her wrists. She stumbled, her blue dress torn, her legs trembling, but not once did she beg. They accused her of helping an outlaw escape, though the whole town knew she was too soft-hearted to turn anyone away, even a starving man with a bounty on his head. But the marshals knew deputies, men, too proud of their badges and too quick to draw, needed someone to blame for their own failures, and Ilara became the easiest to sacrifice. They bound her between two dead mesquite trees, the rough bark scraping her back, and pulled the ropes so tight she felt her shoulders burn. The crowd watched in tight circles, some guilty, some indifferent, some secretly relieved it wasn't their daughter tied up in front of the whole town. The deputy in charge, Clayton Briggs, rode up with arrogance, dripping from his smirk, tapping his revolver against his thigh as if he were conducting a show. "We'll loosen the ropes when she talks," he announced, though everyone knew she had nothing to confess. Ilara's lips were cracked, her throat dry, but her spirit refused to break. She stared straight ahead, blinking back the sweat and fear stinging her eyes, praying anyone would come. She thought of her father lying weak in his bed, unaware his daughter was being punished for a kindness she didn't regret. The men argued about when to start questioning her again, their voices blending with the swirling wind, and she tried to focus on anything else, the sound of her heartbeat, the rustling branches, the faint echo of hooves somewhere far off. She didn't dare hope, not until the murmurs began. A distant tremor in the earth, a rhythm, a horse's charge, fast, pounding, furious. The dust cloud rose first, then the silhouette of a rider, the sun framing him like a figure from an old legend. The cowboys shifted uneasily, their hands drifting to their guns. Clayton squinted and scoffed. Oh, great, him! Because everyone knew who rode like that, fearless, unflinching and reckless enough to challenge the whole town, if necessary. Colt Reddington, the man folks whispered about, the man with a reputation for showing up when justice seemed to be dying, and the man who owed Ilara his life. She had tended his wounds 2 winters ago when bounty hunters left him, bleeding near her father's fence, and though she never made him promise anything, Colt had sworn silently that he would repay that kindness, even if it meant riding into hell itself. As he burst through the dust cloud, his horse reared, his revolver already drawn, eyes blazing with rage at the sight of Ilara strung between the trees like an animal. Who did this? He barked, but he didn't wait for an answer. Clayton rode forward, smug and weapon ready, and sneered. She's accused of aiding a criminal. Step aside, Reddington. This ain't your business. Colt's jaw tightened. His voice dropped into a tone so cold it sliced the air clean open. Untie her, Clayton laughed. Or what? And then Colt aimed his revolver directly at Clayton's hand, steady, unwavering, deadly calm. Touch her again, he said, slow enough for every man present to feel it settle in their bones. And die. The wind went silent. The men stepped back. Even the horses stilled as if the earth itself was waiting for someone to breathe wrong. Ilara looked up, exhaustion blurring her vision, but relief tugged at her chest. Colt had come. He had actually come. And in that moment between danger and salvation, the entire town realized they had just invited a storm. The tension thickened like smoke as Colt held his revolver steady, his horse stamping impatiently beneath him. Clayton Briggs licked his lips, trying to act unbothered, yet sweat trickled down the back of his neck. Everyone in that dusty square knew the truth. Colt Reddington didn't make empty threats. A single twitch of Clayton's trigger finger would set off a storm the town couldn't contain. Colt's gaze was locked onto the man responsible for tying Ilara up, but his peripheral vision tracked every twitch of the surrounding cowboys. You're interfering with town justice, Clayton spat, raising his gun higher, but Colt tilted his head slightly, his voice steady as iron. Justice? This is a lynch-in dressed up in badges. The words stabbed the deputy's pride, but none dared step forward. Colt finally lowered his gun, only slightly, and dismounted with deliberate slowness, boots hitting the dirt like warning bells. He moved toward Ilara, ignoring Clayton's sputtering objections, and the deputies instinctively widened their circle, giving the cowboy space as though the heat radiating off him might burn them alive. Ilara's breath hitched when Colt reached her. His eyes softened instantly, the fury melting into concern. "Ilara, I'm here." The words were gentle, but laced with something deeper, something unspoken, yet unmistakable. He examined the ropes, his jaw tightening at the sight of her bruised wrists. "Who did the tying?" Colt muttered, though he didn't need an answer. The knots were sloppy, cruel, rushed, Clayton's signature. As he cut her free, Ilara collapsed forward, her legs unable to hold her weight. But Colt caught her effortlessly, cradling her against his chest. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The deputies exchanged alarmed glances. Clayton's face darkened with rage. "She's a criminal! You're aiding her escape!" he shouted, blasting fear into his own men to nudge them into action. Several guns were drawn, but Colt didn't flinch. Holding Ilara as if she were the only person in the world, he turned slowly to face them all. "She helped a starving man," he said. "If that's a crime, you better lock up half this town." His voice rang out, slicing through the dusty air, awakening guilt in those who had stayed silent. Ilara leaned her head against him, exhausted but conscious enough to hear the shift happening around them. Her heart pounded, not just from fear, but from the knowledge that Colt had risked everything for her. Clayton, burning with wounded pride, took one reckless step forward. "Put her down, Reddington." Colt didn't blink. "Last warning." Clayton raised his gun, shaking, but intent on proving something. And then it happened faster than lightning, cracking across a storm sky. Colt shifted Ilara behind him, drew his revolver with blinding speed, and fired at the ground inches from Clayton's boot. The bullet shot up dust like a miniature explosion. Clayton stumbled backward, dropping his weapon with a yelp. The crowd erupted in panic, scattering. Deputies froze, afraid to escalate further. Colt stepped over the fallen gun, kicked it across the ground, and growled, "Next bullet doesn't hit the dirt." Clayton believed him. Everyone did. No one moved as Colt lifted Ilara gently onto his horse, mounting behind her to keep her steady. She clutched his arm weakly, whispering, "Why did you come?" Colt leaned close, his voice rough with emotion he didn't bother hiding. "Because the world may forget kindness, Ilara, but I don't." He nudged the horse, and the crowd parted like a tide, clearing a path as they rode through. No one dared to stop them. No one dared to speak. Only when they reached the ridge overlooking the valley did Ilara find the strength to look up at him. "You saved me," she whispered. Colt shook his head gently. "You saved me first." The wind carried them onward. Two souls tethered not by fate, but by the quiet power of compassion repaid. And as the sun dipped behind the distant canyon, it was clear to anyone watching. That day would be remembered, not as a day of cruelty, but as the day a cowboy rewrote justice with courage, loyalty, and a single unbreakable vow: touch her again and die.